virtually. I do believe that the interest in this conference is so massive that just a few minutes ago, I think there was a mention of 126 people or so who had shown an interest in linking up virtually. And I can tell you that some of us are not at all comfortable being in front of the media like this. But circumstances dictate that we do today. It is my pleasure to say to all of you, we've been waiting for the past 10 or so minutes for our minister, and he is here now. And indeed, as one says that, one should also apologize to all of you for keeping you waiting while we were finalizing a few logistical issues. So without any further ado, colleagues, given that you've been waiting for too long, it is my pleasure to present the Minister of Transport to you. That is the President, our Minister, and National Treasury, by not endorsing the proposed awards. And therefore, we must be dealt with as brainless, delinquent, and intransigent children. In shameless and selfish efforts to even turn the South African public against us, we have been presented as killers of the construction industry and portrayed as suppressors of job creation. Pure blackmail. Pure blackmail. What is deliberately hidden from the public is that we have, in 2 of those tenders, thwarted the very killing of part of that industry and the very suppression of job creation for ordinary people, which would have happened if we had allowed those tenders to be awarded. And I'm going to be specific. We have frustrated the total irregular exclusion of subcontracting in the Mtentu tender and the reduction by a massive 50% of the routine 30% subcontracting in the GFIP tender. Mtentu, no subcontracting had been built into the tender. Therefore, that community and the business people there would have lost 30% of what would have been due to them from a subcontracting point of view. And if you recall, as the minister indicated, the people of Mtentu vociferously stood against their deprivation from economic opportunities in that erstwhile tender of Mtentu. Now, how do we, as the Sanral board, management, and staff, go back to Mtentu and say, here's a new project, but the 30% subcontracting that you've been expecting is not going to happen? We think people want to control us. And I am glad that the minister has himself said he receives phone calls from them to deal with us, when in actual fact we don't involve the minister as far as tenders are concerned. I will later on indicate that the minister asked me when he was at the PICC, Mr. Mhambi, why am I hearing here at the PICC that you have not awarded tenders relating to critical projects? I said to the minister, with due respect, Minister, we would never do that. We would never tell you about tenders we have awarded or not awarded. And the reason is the law. These processes are supposed to be dealt with cleanly, with integrity. One of our board members, Rob, uses the expression squeaky clean when we deal with these matters. And he should know better. He is almost twice my age. We place, I was then saying, please check Sanral awards and payments over the recent past, and you will be shocked to see that some of the leaders of the attack on this board are the very entities which have been benefiting more than others from Sanral procurement. The question we must ask and answer then is if this recent non-award hasn't interfered with a culture of entitlement that has been built over the years in relation to the relationship of some of these entities with Sanral. How else can we explain the amount of vitriol spewed at this board for executing its fiduciary responsibility and duty to the organization and the people of South Africa? We place on record here today that our response to any bid tendered has always been, currently is, and will always be based solely on the law. We therefore consider the invocation of the President, our Minister and National Treasury in this matter by some bidders to be mischievous and bordering on illegality. Procurement disputes are not adjudicated upon by those individuals and structures. They don't get involved in procurement disputes. Not the President, not our Minister, not National Treasury, actually not even God. But they are adjudicated by the law courts. Procurement disputes are not resolved through public pressure via the media, but through the objectivity and independence of our country's law courts. The invocation of authorities above this board to not so subtly compel us to endorse proposed awards we have refused to endorse is a blatant call for the corruption of public procurement, which requires that as an accounting authority, we must apply our minds independently of any external influence and act only in terms of relevant legislation and policies in pronouncing on tenders. We may, under no circumstances, involve the President, our Minister, National Treasury, and indeed any other individual or structure outside properly appointed independent advisors who have no interests in the bids in making those determinations. It is for that reason that our Minister heard for the first time about our decision on those tenders at a meeting of the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission, which structure itself got to hear about our decision when it requested an update on the status of economic recovery projects as part of the stimulation of the economy, of course. In the 3 years plus of its existence, this material irregularity. In 3 of the 5 cases, there were other compelling reasons for the board's refusal to endorse award recommendations. We therefore now list the specific lapses and violations relating to specific tenders which led to the board's obligation not to endorse any of the 5 bids for award. It is important, as we do so, to reiterate that not all awards are tabled at board for noting, but only those above the 750 million rand threshold, under which all the tenders below fall. And to Wild Coast, intend to preach. The first reason is the one that is common to all. I'm not going to bore you with it again, namely the design consultants and the extent of their involvement. The next thing there is a bid that should have been considered as non-responsive and therefore disqualified because it was not submitted in the prescribed and required format in terms of the specifications was accepted. It should not have been accepted. Another thing, the specifications included an increase in the scope of works by virtue of additional roads that were originally planned for community development projects in order to accommodate the 30% subcontracting requirement. This resulted in a deviation from the 30% subcontracting, and as a consequence, there was no 30% subcontracting on the actual project. The deviation was done without the requisite board approval, and therefore it was irregular. The people who allowed this were not authorized by the board to remove that 30%. And as I have said, we would have walked into a lion's den in Mtentu if we got there and said there's no 30% at 12 midnight. And I would imagine he himself would be fired at 12 midnight, because it is his duty to make sure that we don't do what I have just said we're not supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's two more questions. Are you at liberty, Chair, to disclose the identity of the independent public entity that will help with the new tender process? The next question, clarity is needed on the re-advertisement within 4 months. Are you saying these are going to be advertised, adjudicated, and awarded within 4 months?
Thank you very much. I'm afraid.
Are raised. Please raise your questions in the chat, as you may not be audible. And then I've got colleagues who are participating in the chat. They will alert me about those questions. Chair, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Roy. That's a question we tread, your first question, right now, as this board. Because, as indicated, tenders below 750 million rand never get to be seen by the board in terms of deep detail. We only get to know that they were awarded. Our management reports regularly to the board about tenders awarded. But we do not probe in the manner that we have to probe when we are dealing with those above 750 million rand. So, that is a question we have asked our acting CEO, and we have said to the acting CEO, to the extent that there might be those that were awarded without recognizing the board resolution, we need to know about them, and management knows what to do in terms of supply chain management processes. And here you are talking questions of condonation and so on. Because as the board, we did not know about them. But once we get to know about them, it is management itself which must then decide what approach it wants to make to the board, and we cannot preempt that. We are waiting, and indeed we will let you know